The money felt dirty in Imani Washington's hands as she counted the crisp bills for the third time. $50. Such a small amount for such a terrible thing to do. Remember, you need to make him never want to see you again, Rebecca Chin said from the driver's seat of her gleaming BMW. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the steering wheel as she spoke. Be late. Be rude. Spill something on him if you have to. Just make sure this date is a complete disaster. Imani stared at the woman beside her, trying to understand how someone could hate their ex-boyfriend so much. Rebecca's dark eyes held no warmth, only cold calculation. Her expensive perfume filled the car, making Imani feel even more out of place in her second-hand dress. Why don't you just call him yourself and tell him you don't want him dating anyone else? Imani asked, folding the money carefully. Rebecca's laugh was sharp. Men like Jonathan Mitchell don't listen to their ex-girlfriends. They think they know what's best. But when a date goes badly, really badly, they remember it. They become cautious. Scared to try again. The way Rebecca said his name made Imani's stomach twist. There was poison in her voice, a bitterness that seemed to seep into everything around her. Imani had never met this Jonathan person, but she already felt sorry for him. What if he's a good guy? Imani asked quietly. What if he doesn't deserve this? Good guys don't exist, Rebecca said flatly. Trust me, I dated him for 2 years. He's just like all the rest. Rich, arrogant, thinks money can solve everything. You'll be doing yourself a favor by getting this over with quickly. Imani looked down at her worn sneakers. She needed this money so desperately. Her textbooks for next semester cost $200, and her rent was due in 3 days. She'd been living off ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches for weeks. Her part-time job at the campus bookstore barely covered her basic expenses. When Rebecca had approached her at the coffee shop where Imani studied every evening, offering $50 for one evening's work, it had seemed too good to be true. And maybe it was. He's expecting to meet someone named Jennifer, Rebecca continued, pulling out her phone to show Imani a photo. I created a fake profile and set up the date. You just need to show up and be yourself. Well, your worst self. Can you handle that? Imani studied the restaurant photo on the screen. La Bernardine was the kind of place she'd only seen in movies. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, men in expensive suits, and women wearing jewelry worth more than her car. She would stick out like a sore thumb. What if someone recognizes that I'm not Jennifer? Imani asked. They won't. Jonathan's never seen her photos clearly. I made sure of that. Rebecca's smile was cruel. Besides, he's expecting a brunette and you're perfect. Beautiful, well-spoken when you want to be exactly his type. That's what will make this hurt so much more when you destroy the evening. The words stung more than Rebecca probably intended. Imani had always been proud of her appearance. Her dark skin glowed with health despite her poor diet, and her natural hair formed a crown of soft curls around her face. But sitting in this expensive car next to someone who clearly had everything handed to her, Imani felt small. I need you to promise me something, Rebecca said, turning to face Imani directly. No matter how charming he tries to be, no matter what he offers you, remember that this is just a job. You're not there to make friends or find love. You're there to make him regret ever agreeing to go on a blind date. The intensity in Rebecca's voice scared Imani. This wasn't just about preventing an ex from dating. This was about revenge, pure and simple. But $50 was $50, and Imani's bank account had been overdrawn for a week. I understand, Imani said, though every instinct told her to give the money back and walk away. Good. The reservation is at 8 tomorrow night. Table for Mitchell. Just show up and be the worst date he's ever had. Rebecca reached across and opened the passenger door. And Imani? If you mess this up, if you go soft and actually try to make the date pleasant, don't expect to get paid. I'll know. Imani stepped out of the car onto the sidewalk outside her apartment building. The BMW drove away before she could change her mind, leaving her standing alone with $50 and a growing sense of dread. She climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment, each step heavier than the last. Her roommate Tiffany was studying at the kitchen table, surrounded by nursing textbooks and empty coffee cups. How did the mysterious job interview go? Tiffany asked without looking up. It wasn't exactly an interview, Imani said, sitting down across from her best friend. More like accepting a deal with the devil. Tiffany finally raised her head, taking in Imani's expression. What kind of deal? Imani told her everything. About Rebecca, about the blind date, about the $50 that was supposed to solve her immediate problems but felt more like blood money with each passing minute. You can't go through with this, Tiffany said immediately. This woman sounds crazy. What if she's dangerous? She's not dangerous, Imani replied, though she wasn't entirely sure. She's just bitter about her breakup. And $50 is $50. There has to be another way. You could ask for extra shifts at work, or maybe apply for emergency student aid. I already tried all of that. Imani's voice was small. Tiffany, I haven't eaten a real meal in 5 days. I'm behind on rent, behind on my phone bill, and if I don't buy my textbooks soon, I'm going to fail my classes. One terrible date in exchange for enough money to keep my head above water for another month? Maybe it's worth it. But even as she said the words, Imani knew she was trying to convince herself more than her friend. She'd never deliberately hurt an innocent person before, and the thought of starting now made her feel sick. Have you ever been so desperate that you considered doing something you knew was wrong? What would you do in Imani's situation? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more heart-pounding stories like this one. Tomorrow evening couldn't come fast enough, and yet Imani dreaded every minute that brought her closer to the moment when she would have to look a stranger in the eye and deliberately ruin his evening. She just hoped that Rebecca was right about one thing, that Jonathan Mitchell was the kind of man who deserved what was coming to him. Imani spent most of the next day researching Jonathan Mitchell online, hoping to find something that would make her feel better about what she was planning to do. What she found only made everything worse. His company's website showed him at charity events, cutting ribbons at new community centers, and shaking hands with local business owners. Mitchell Tech Solutions had created over 200 jobs in the past 3 years, and according to several articles, Jonathan had personally funded a scholarship program for underprivileged students. This doesn't help, Imani muttered, closing her laptop in frustration. The man in the photos didn't look like the arrogant rich boy Rebecca had described. He had kind eyes and a genuine smile, the kind that reached his eyes when he laughed. In one photo, he was kneeling down to talk to a little girl at what looked like a school event, his expensive suit getting dirty on the playground without him seeming to care. Imani tried calling Rebecca twice, thinking maybe she could return the money and back out of the deal. Both times the calls went straight to voicemail. By 6 o'clock she was running out of time and options. You don't have to do this, Tiffany said, watching Imani get ready. Just don't show up. What's the worst that could happen? She knows where I live, Imani replied, applying lip gloss with shaking hands. And where I work. And she seems like the type to make trouble if she doesn't get what she wants. The dress she'd chosen was nice enough for an expensive restaurant but deliberately inappropriate for a first date. Too short, too tight, too flashy. She'd borrowed Tiffany's platform heels, knowing they would make her tower over most men and probably make walking difficult. Her plan was simple. Arrive 30 minutes late, order the most expensive items on the menu, complain about everything, and be generally unpleasant until Jonathan Mitchell couldn't wait to end the evening. She'd practiced her worst behavior in the mirror, perfecting a bored expression and dismissive tone. The ride to La Bernardine took forever. Imani sat in the back of the taxi, watching the city pass by and trying to ignore the growing knot in her stomach. She'd never been to this part of town before, where the buildings were taller and cleaner, where people walked with purpose and confidence. You sure this is the right place? The driver asked as they pulled up to the restaurant. Looks pretty fancy. I'm sure, Imani said, though she felt anything but certain. The restaurant was even more intimidating in person. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed elegant dining rooms filled with well-dressed couples and business associates. The doorman wore white gloves and greeted everyone with a professional smile. Imani checked her reflection in the window one more time. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger. Her dress was too much, her makeup too bold, her whole appearance carefully calculated to make a bad impression. This wasn't who she really was, but it was who she needed to be for the next 2 hours. Table for Mitchell, she told the hostess, who looked her up and down with barely concealed disapproval. Right this way, miss. The hostess led her through the main dining room, where conversations were conducted in hushed tones and every detail spoke of luxury and refinement. Imani felt like an imposter, which she supposed she was in more ways than one. Mr. Mitchell is already waiting, the hostess said, gesturing toward a corner table where a man in a navy suit was studying his phone. Imani's first thought was that the photos online hadn't done him justice. Jonathan Mitchell was more handsome in person, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it and strong features that spoke of both intelligence and kindness. When he looked up and saw her approaching, his face lit up with a smile that made her stomach do strange things. Jennifer? He asked, standing up as she reached the table. That's me, Imani lied, accepting the hand he offered. His grip was warm and firm, and he held her chair out for her like a gentleman. I was starting to worry you might not show up, he said, settling back into his seat. I'm Jonathan. It's really nice to meet you. His voice was deeper than she'd expected, with a warmth that made her want to forget all about Rebecca's instructions. This was not going to be as easy as she'd hoped. Sorry I'm late, Imani said, not sounding sorry at all. Traffic was terrible. No problem at all. I'm just glad you made it. Jonathan signaled for the waiter. Have you been here before? The menu is incredible. I'm sure it's fine, Imani said dismissively, though she was secretly amazed by the elegance of everything around her. The wine glasses sparkled under soft lighting, and the table setting included more forks than she'd ever seen in one place. Jonathan didn't seem put off by her cool response. Instead, he launched into an easy conversation about the restaurant, the neighborhood, and his day at work. He talked about his employees like they were family, mentioning their kids' soccer games and anniversary celebrations with genuine affection. This was going to be harder than she'd thought. Rebecca had prepared her for arrogance and condescension, not kindness and genuine interest. Every time Jonathan smiled at her, Imani felt the plan slipping away. So tell me about yourself, he said after they'd ordered. What do you do? I'm between jobs, Imani said, which was technically true if you counted her part-time work as not really a career. Trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. That's smart, Jonathan said. Too many people rush into careers without really thinking about what makes them happy. What are you passionate about? The question caught her off guard. When was the last time someone had asked her about her passions instead of her problems? I'm studying social work, she found herself saying before she could stop herself. I want to help kids who are growing up the way I did. With not much money, not many options. Show them that things can get better. Jonathan's eyes brightened with interest. That's incredible. The world needs more people like you. What made you choose that field? For a moment, Imani forgot she was supposed to be ruining this date. She found herself telling him about her childhood, about watching her mother work 3 jobs just to keep them afloat, about the social worker who had helped her apply for college scholarships when no one else believed she could make it. Your mother sounds like an amazing woman, Jonathan said softly. And it sounds like you inherited her strength. The compliment hit Imani like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had called her strong instead of struggling? When had anyone looked at her like she was someone worth knowing instead of someone to be pitied? She was supposed to be making him uncomfortable, not the other way around. But somehow, in the space of 30 minutes, Jonathan Mitchell had managed to see past her deliberately awful exterior and find something worth talking to. This was not going according to plan at all. Are you okay? Jonathan asked gently, and Imani realized she'd been staring at him without speaking for several long moments. Fine, she said quickly, remembering her mission. Just thinking about how much this meal is going to cost. She'd meant it to sound gold-digging and shallow, but Jonathan just laughed. Don't worry about that, he said. I asked you out, so dinner is definitely on me. Please, order whatever looks good to you. His generosity only made her feel worse. She opened the menu and deliberately chose the most expensive items she could find. The lobster tail, the truffle pasta, a bottle of wine that cost more than she usually spent on groceries in a month. Excellent choices, Jonathan said when she finished ordering. I love seeing someone who knows what they want. Even her obvious gold digging was being interpreted as confidence. This man was either incredibly naive or incredibly kind, and either option made her plan feel more terrible by the minute. So what about you? She asked, trying to sound bored. What do you do all day, count your money? Jonathan laughed again, and the sound was so genuine that it made her chest tighten. Mostly I try to solve problems, he said. My company creates software solutions for small businesses. We help them manage everything from payroll to customer relations. It's not glamorous, but it keeps me busy. Sounds boring, Imani said, though it actually sounded interesting and useful. It can be, Jonathan agreed. But I love seeing a small business owner realize they can finally take a vacation because our software is handling their inventory, or watching them hire their first employee because we've helped them grow. That part never gets boring. The waiter brought their wine, and Imani deliberately knocked over her water glass while reaching for it. Water spread across the white tablecloth and dripped onto the floor. I'm so sorry, she said, though she tried to sound more annoyed than apologetic. These things happen, Jonathan said, immediately signaling for the waiter and helping to clean up the mess. He handed her his napkin without being asked and made sure she had a dry place to put her purse. His calm response to her accident made her feel even worse. She was trying to be the date from hell, and he was treating her like a lady who deserved respect and kindness. You must think I'm a complete mess, Imani said, testing him. I think you're nervous, Jonathan replied thoughtfully. First dates can be stressful. I'm nervous too if that helps. You don't seem nervous. I'm very good at hiding it, he said with a smile. But I keep wondering if you're having a good time, if you think I'm boring, if you're going to find an excuse to leave early. All the usual first date anxieties. His honesty was disarming. Here she was actively trying to make the evening unpleasant, and he was worried about whether she was enjoying herself. The guilt was becoming almost unbearable. Their food arrived, and Imani made a show of complaining about the temperature, the presentation, and the portion size. Jonathan listened patiently to each complaint and offered to send everything back to the kitchen. No, it's fine, Imani said, realizing that making the restaurant staff redo everything would only hurt innocent people, not Jonathan. Are you sure? You seemed really unhappy with it. I complain about everything, she said, which was both part of her act and completely untrue. It's just who I am. Everyone has their quirks, Jonathan said easily. My ex-girlfriend used to say I was too optimistic about everything. She thought I should be more cynical. Rebecca. He was talking about Rebecca without knowing that Imani knew exactly who he meant. Maybe she had a point, Imani said carefully. Sometimes people take advantage of nice guys. Maybe, Jonathan agreed. But I'd rather be taken advantage of occasionally than become the kind of person who assumes the worst about everyone. Life's too short to be suspicious all the time. His words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Here she was, literally taking advantage of his kindness, and he was defending his choice to trust people. She felt like the worst person in the world. What happened with her? Imani asked, knowing she was stepping into dangerous territory. Jonathan was quiet for a moment, considering his words. We wanted different things, I guess. She thought I should be more focused on making money, expanding the business, building an empire. But I like my company the size it is. I know all my employees personally, I can make sure we're doing right by our clients, and I still have time for other things that matter to me. Like what? Like the scholarship program we fund for kids who want to go to college but can't afford it. Like volunteering at the community center on weekends. Like having time for relationships and friendships and actually living life instead of just working all the time. Imani stared at him, trying to reconcile this man with Rebecca's description of an arrogant rich boy who thought money could solve everything. Either Rebecca had been lying, or she'd never really known Jonathan at all. That sounds nice, Imani said quietly, and for the first time all evening she wasn't acting. What about you? Jonathan asked. What do you do when you're not studying social work? I work at the campus bookstore, Imani said, again finding herself telling the truth. And I volunteer at a reading program for elementary school kids. It's not much, but I love seeing their faces when they sound out a new word or finish their first chapter book. Jonathan's smile was brilliant. That's not much. That's everything. Those kids are lucky to have you. The conversation continued, and despite her best efforts to remain cold and dismissive, Imani found herself genuinely enjoying Jonathan's company. He asked thoughtful questions, listened to her answers, and shared stories that made her laugh despite herself. He told her about the time he tried to impress a client by cooking dinner and had set off 3 smoke alarms. She found herself sharing the story of her disastrous first day at college, when she'd gotten lost and ended up in a graduate-level chemistry class for an hour before realizing her mistake. You stayed for the whole hour? Jonathan asked, laughing. I was too embarrassed to leave, Imani admitted. I took notes and everything. I still don't understand what they were talking about. By the time dessert arrived, Imani had almost forgotten why she was there. Jonathan was nothing like Rebecca had described. He was kind, funny, intelligent, and genuinely interested in making the world a better place. He treated the waitstaff with respect, asked about her opinions on everything from politics to movies, and made her feel like the most interesting person in the room. This has been wonderful, Jonathan said as they finished their coffee. I know this might sound forward, but I'd love to see you again. Maybe somewhere less formal next time where we can really talk. Panic shot through Imani's chest. This was the moment she was supposed to crush his hopes, to make sure he never wanted to date anyone Rebecca set him up with again. But looking into his hopeful eyes, she couldn't bring herself to do it. She started, then stopped. I don't know. Is it something I said? Jonathan asked, concern replacing the hope in his expression. I feel like we had a real connection tonight, but maybe I misread the situation. No, Imani said quickly. You didn't misread anything. You're wonderful. It's just complicated. Complicated how? She couldn't tell him the truth. Not here, not like this. But she also couldn't lie anymore, not to his face, not when he was looking at her like she mattered. Can I think about it? she asked finally. Of course, Jonathan said, though she could see the disappointment he was trying to hide. Here's my card. Call me when you're ready, whether that's tomorrow or next month. I'll wait. He walked her outside and insisted on calling her a taxi, paying the driver in advance and making sure she had his number saved in her phone. Even when she was breaking his heart, he was taking care of her. As the taxi pulled away from the restaurant, Imani looked back to see Jonathan still standing on the sidewalk, watching to make sure she got away safely. Her heart was breaking and she had no idea what she was going to do next. She'd taken $50 to ruin a good man's evening, and instead, she'd fallen a little bit in love with him. Rebecca was going to be furious, but for the first time in weeks, Imani's biggest problem wasn't money. It was figuring out how to fix the mess she'd made of everything. Imani barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jonathan's face when she'd hesitated about a second date. The disappointment in his eyes haunted her, made worse by the knowledge that she'd put it there deliberately. Her phone buzzed at 7 in the morning. Rebecca. How did it go? The text was short and demanding. Imani stared at the message for 5 minutes before responding. He wants to see me again. Her phone rang immediately. What do you mean he wants to see you again? Rebecca's voice was sharp with anger. What did you do wrong? I did everything you asked, Imani lied. I was late, I was rude, I complained about everything. He just didn't seem to mind. That's impossible. Jonathan Mitchell has very specific standards for women. If you'd followed my instructions properly, he would have been disgusted. Maybe you don't know him as well as you think you do, Imani said, immediately regretting the words. Rebecca's silence was dangerous. What exactly did you talk about? Nothing important. Work, college, general stuff. Imani tried to keep her voice steady. Look, I held up my end of the deal. It's not my fault he's more forgiving than you expected. This isn't over, Rebecca said coldly. If he calls you, you need to make sure the second date is worse than the first. I'll pay you another $50. The line went dead before Imani could respond. She stared at her phone, wondering how she'd gotten herself into this situation. $100 would solve a lot of problems, but the thought of hurting Jonathan again made her stomach turn. She was still debating what to do when her phone rang again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. Hello? Hi Imani? This is Jonathan. From last night. Her heart started racing. Hi. I hope I'm not calling too early. I know you said you needed to think about a second date, but I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. I have an idea that might interest you. What kind of idea? There's a charity event this Saturday at the community center where I volunteer. It's a fundraiser for the literacy program you mentioned loving. I thought maybe you'd like to come with me, see the program in action. No pressure for it to be a date if you're not ready for that. Just two people who care about helping kids learn to read. Imani closed her eyes. He was making it impossible to say no, and he probably didn't even realize it. How was she supposed to sabotage a charity event for children's literacy? I don't know, she said weakly. The kids would love you, Jonathan continued, and she could hear the genuine enthusiasm in his voice. And you could see firsthand how the money we raise gets used. Plus it's completely casual. No fancy restaurant, no pressure, just good people doing good work. She should say no. She should end this before it went any further and someone got really hurt. But the thought of seeing Jonathan again, of watching him work with children, of being part of something that actually mattered. Okay, she heard herself saying. I'd like that. Really? The joy in his voice made her chest tighten. That's wonderful. Should I pick you up or would you prefer to meet there? I'll meet you there, Imani said, not wanting him to see her apartment building and realize how different their lives really were. Perfect. It starts at 10, but if you want to come a little early, I can show you around. The address is 425 Oak Street. And Imani? Thank you for saying yes. I know it might seem weird to invite someone to volunteer on a second date, but you seem like the kind of person who would understand why this matters to me. After he hung up, Imani sat in her kitchen staring at her phone. Tiffany emerged from her bedroom, took one look at Imani's face and sat down across from her. That was him, wasn't it? He invited me to a charity event. For kids who are learning to read. Imani's voice was barely a whisper. How am I supposed to ruin that? You're not, Tiffany said firmly. You're going to call him back, tell him the truth about Rebecca, and hope he's as understanding as he seems to be. I can't. You didn't see his face when he talked about his ex-girlfriend. He said she thought he should be more cynical, less trusting. If he finds out that someone he's starting to care about was hired to deceive him, then he'll be hurt, but he'll get over it. Especially if he really cares about you. Tiffany reached across the table and took Imani's hands. But if you keep lying to him, if you keep pretending to be someone you're not, this is going to end badly for everyone. Imani knew her friend was right, but she also knew she was in too deep to back out now. She'd made her choice the moment she'd accepted Rebecca's money, and now she had to live with the consequences. Saturday morning arrived too soon. Imani spent an hour getting ready, changing clothes 3 times before settling on jeans and a simple sweater. She wanted to look nice but not like she was trying too hard. The contradiction was exhausting. The community center was in a part of town Imani knew well, not far from where she'd grown up. The building was older but well-maintained, with colorful murals on the outside walls and a playground that had seen better days but was still functional. She found Jonathan in the main hall, setting up tables and chairs with a group of volunteers. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt that read "Books Change Lives," and he looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "Imani," he called when he spotted her, his face lighting up. "You came." "I said I would," she replied, and he grinned. "Come on, let me introduce you to everyone." The next hour was a blur of names and faces, all people who gave up their Saturday mornings to help kids learn to read. There were retired teachers, college students, parents, and business owners, all united by the belief that literacy could change lives. "This is Imani," Jonathan said to each group they met. "She's studying social work and volunteers with a reading program at her college." The pride in his voice when he introduced her made Imani's chest ache. He was so happy she was there, so eager to share this part of his world with her. She felt like a fraud. "The kids start arriving at 11, Jonathan explained as they finished setting up. "We pair each child with an adult volunteer, and they spend an hour reading together. Some of the kids are just learning to sound out words, others are ready for chapter books. We have books for every level." "How did you get involved with this?" Imani asked. "My mom was a teacher," Jonathan said, his expression growing soft. "She always said that reading was the key to everything else. When she got sick a few years ago, I started volunteering here in her honor. She's better now, but I kept coming because I love it." Another piece of the Jonathan puzzle fell into place. He wasn't volunteering to look good or because he had money to spare. He was doing it because someone he loved had taught him that education mattered. The children began arriving and Imani watched Jonathan transform. With the adults he was professional and kind. With the kids he was pure magic. He got down on their level, remembered details about their lives, and made each child feel like the most important person in the room. "Mr. Jonathan," a little girl with pigtails called out, running toward them. "I finished the book you gave me last week." "Isabella, that's fantastic," Jonathan said, kneeling down to her level. "What was your favorite part?" As Isabella launched into an animated description of her book, Imani felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't about money or business or impressing anyone. This was about a man who genuinely cared about making the world better, one child at a time. "Would you like to read with Miss Imani today?" Jonathan asked Isabella. "She loves books just as much as we do." Isabella studied Imani carefully, then nodded. "Okay. But I get to pick the book." For the next hour, Imani sat on a small plastic chair next to Isabella, helping her work through a story about a brave little mouse. The girl was a determined reader, sounding out each unfamiliar word with fierce concentration. "You're really good at this," Isabella said during a break. "Are you a teacher?" "Not yet," Imani said. "But maybe someday." "You should be. You explain things good, and you don't make me feel stupid when I don't know a word." The simple compliment hit Imani harder than any praise she'd received in college. This was why she wanted to go into social work, to help kids like Isabella believe in themselves. Across the room she caught Jonathan watching them with a smile that made her heart skip. He looked so happy, so content, like this was exactly where he belonged. And for the first time since she'd met him, Imani allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to belong here too. The event was a success, raising over $3,000 for new books and supplies. As volunteers began cleaning up, Jonathan appeared at Imani's side. "So what did you think?" he asked. "I think this is incredible," Imani said honestly. "Those kids are lucky to have you." "We're lucky to have them," Jonathan replied. "They remind us why this work matters." "Isabella asked me if you're coming back next week." "Next week? We do this every Saturday. I know it's a big commitment, but if you're interested." He was offering her a place in his world, a chance to be part of something meaningful. All she had to do was keep lying to him, keep pretending to be someone she wasn't, and maybe she could have it all. The guilt was crushing, but the temptation was stronger. "I'd like that," she said, and watched his face light up with joy. As they walked out of the community center together, Imani tried to ignore the voice in her head telling her that she was making everything worse. She was falling for Jonathan Mitchell and he was falling for a lie. Sooner or later, the truth was going to come out, and when it did, it was going to destroy them both. But for now, walking beside him in the afternoon sunshine and listening to him talk about the kids they'd helped that day, she could almost forget that their entire relationship was built on deception. Almost. The week between their charity date and the next Saturday felt like the longest of Imani's life. Jonathan texted her every day, sharing stories about work, asking about her classes, and sending photos from the community center. Each message made her smile and feel terrible at the same time. Rebecca called twice, demanding updates and growing more frustrated each time Imani reported that Jonathan seemed more interested, not less. "You're doing this wrong," Rebecca snapped during their second conversation. "I'm beginning to think you're not trying to sabotage these dates at all." "I'm doing my best," Imani lied. "Maybe he's just not as shallow as you thought he was." "Jonathan Mitchell is exactly as shallow as I know he is," Rebecca said coldly. "I dated him for 2 years. I know what disgusts him, what turns him off, what makes him run. If my instructions aren't working, it's because you're not following them. Then maybe you should find someone else to do your dirty work." The words were out before Imani could stop them. Rebecca's silence on the other end of the line was dangerous. "Are you developing feelings for him?" Rebecca asked finally, her voice like ice. "Of course not," Imani said quickly. "He's not my type." "Good. Because if I find out you're sabotaging my sabotage, there will be consequences. I know where you work, where you go to school, where you live. Don't test me, Imani." The threat hung in the air long after Rebecca hung up. Imani stared at her phone, wondering what kind of person she'd gotten involved with. Rebecca wasn't just bitter about a breakup. She was dangerous. Friday evening, Imani was studying at the campus coffee shop when her phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. "Looking forward to tomorrow. The kids have been asking about you all week." Before she could respond, another text came through. "Also, I hope this isn't too forward, but would you like to have dinner with me afterward? Somewhere quiet where we can really talk." Imani's heart raced. A real dinner, just the two of them, with no charity event to distract from the growing feelings between them. It was exactly what she wanted and exactly what would make everything more complicated. She was still staring at the message when someone slid into the seat across from her. Rebecca Chin looked perfectly polished as always, but there was something harder in her expression than before. "We need to talk," Rebecca said without preamble. "What are you doing here?" Imani looked around nervously. The coffee shop was crowded with students, but she still felt exposed. "Making sure you understand the situation," Rebecca replied. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're falling for the mark instead of completing the job." "I don't know what you're talking about. Jonathan texted you 30 seconds ago about dinner plans. You got that dreamy look people get when they're falling in love. It's pathetic." The fact that Rebecca had been watching her closely enough to see her reaction to the text was terrifying. "Have you been following me?" "I've been keeping an eye on my investment," Rebecca said smoothly. "And right now that investment isn't paying off. So here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow night you're going to end this once and for all. You're going to tell him you're not interested, that you were just using him for free meals, that he's not good enough for you. Make it hurt." "I can't do that." "You can and you will. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone at your school knows that you're a liar and a fraud. I'll tell them you took money to seduce and deceive an innocent man. I'll make sure you're kicked out of the social work program for ethical violations." Imani's blood ran cold. Her reputation, her future career, everything she'd worked for could disappear if Rebecca followed through on her threats. "You're sick," Imani whispered. "I'm practical," Rebecca replied. "Jonathan Mitchell hurt me and now he's going to pay for it. You're going to help me make sure of that, or you're going to pay for it too." She stood up, leaving $50 more on the table. "Consider this a performance bonus. Use it to buy something that will make tomorrow night extra painful for him. A man like Jonathan falls hard and fast. The higher he flies, the harder he falls." After Rebecca left, Imani sat in the coffee shop until closing time, staring at the money in Jonathan's unanswered text. She was trapped between hurting someone she was falling in love with and destroying her own future. Either way, someone was going to get hurt. She finally texted Jonathan back at midnight, "Dinner sounds perfect." If this was going to be the last time she saw him, at least she wanted to remember what it felt like to be treated like someone worth caring about. Saturday at the community center was magical and heartbreaking at the same time. Jonathan introduced her to more volunteers, included her in planning discussions, and talked about future events like she would definitely be there for them. Isabella ran to hug her the moment she walked in, chattering about the book they'd chosen for that day. I picked a harder one this week because you make the difficult words easy. You're getting to be such a good reader, Imani said, settling into their usual spot. Pretty soon you won't need my help at all. But I like reading with you, Isabella said seriously. Mr. Jonathan said maybe you could be my reading partner every week. Would you like that? The hope in the little girl's eyes was almost too much to bear. I would love that, sweetheart. It was true, and that made everything worse. She would love to come back every week to watch Isabella grow as a reader, to be part of this community that Jonathan had built around helping children. But after tonight, none of that would be possible. During the lunch break, Jonathan pulled her aside. I have something for you, he said, looking almost shy. He handed her a small wrapped package. Inside was a bracelet with a charm shaped like an open book. I saw it at a jewelry store and thought of you, he explained. Because of your work with the reading program, and because you seem to understand that books really can change lives. The bracelet was simple but beautiful, and it must have cost more than Imani made in a month at her part-time job. But more than the money, it was the thought behind it that made her eyes well up with tears. Jonathan, I can't accept this, she said, though everything in her wanted to. Why not? Because. She couldn't finish the sentence without telling him the truth, and she wasn't ready for that conversation in a room full of volunteers and children. Because you're not ready for gifts yet, Jonathan said gently, misunderstanding her hesitation. I get it. We're still figuring out what this is between us. But will you at least keep it? Even if you're not ready to wear it yet? She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. He fastened the bracelet around her wrist with gentle fingers, and she had to fight not to cry at his tenderness. There, he said softly. It looks perfect on you. The rest of the afternoon passed too quickly. Before she knew it, they were saying goodbye to the children and cleaning up the activity room. Isabella hugged her extra tight before leaving with her grandmother. See you next week, Miss Imani, she called out as they walked toward the door. See you next week, Imani replied, knowing it was a lie. Jonathan drove her to the restaurant he'd chosen, a small Italian place that was cozy and intimate without being flashy. The kind of place where people went for real conversations, not to impress each other. This is one of my favorite spots, he said as they were seated. It's been family-owned for 3 generations. The food is incredible, but more importantly, it feels like home. The warmth of the restaurant, the genuine affection in Jonathan's voice, the way he'd spent his Saturday morning helping children learn to read. Everything about him made Imani's heart ache. She'd never met anyone like him, and after tonight, she never would again. You're quiet, Jonathan observed after they'd ordered. Is everything okay? Just thinking, Imani said. About what? About how much she was going to miss him. About how Rebecca's threats were going to force her to break both their hearts. About how she wished she'd never taken that $50 in the first place. About today, she said instead. About how lucky those kids are to have you in their lives. Jonathan's smile was soft. I think I'm the lucky one. They've taught me more than I've taught them. And now, meeting you, seeing how naturally you connect with them. I keep thinking about how much good we could do together. The word, together, hit her like a physical blow. He was already thinking about a future that included her, making plans that would never happen because she was about to destroy everything. Have you ever had to hurt someone you cared about to protect yourself? Sometimes life forces us into impossible choices. What would you do if you were in Imani's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to see how this heartbreaking story unfolds. Jonathan, she said quietly, there's something I need to tell you. What is it? Jonathan asked, concern creeping into his voice at her serious tone. Imani looked into his kind eyes and felt her courage fail her. She couldn't do it. Not here, not like this, not when he was looking at her like she was someone special. I just wanted to say thank you, she said instead, touching the bracelet on her wrist. For this, for today, for being so patient with me while I figure things out. Relief flooded Jonathan's features. You don't have to thank me for being myself, Imani. This is who I am when I'm with someone I care about. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. He was telling her he cared about her, and she was going to have to find a way to crush that care before the evening was over. Their dinner arrived, and Jonathan launched into stories about some of the volunteers they'd worked with that day. He had a way of finding something wonderful to say about everyone, from the retired teacher who came every week despite her arthritis to the teenager who showed up even though his friends made fun of him for volunteering. You see the best in everyone, Imani said, watching him gesture enthusiastically as he described how shy little Marcus had finally read an entire page out loud. I try to, Jonathan agreed. My mom always said that everyone has something good in them, You just have to look hard enough sometimes. I've found that when you expect the best from people, they usually try to live up to it. The philosophy that made him so wonderful was also what made him so vulnerable to someone like Rebecca. His willingness to trust, to see good in people, was going to be his downfall. What if someone doesn't live up to your expectations? Imani asked quietly. What if they let you down? Jonathan considered the question seriously. Then I try to understand why. People don't usually set out to hurt others. Most of the time, when someone disappoints you, it's because they're dealing with something you don't know about. Fear, desperation, pain. If you can figure out what's driving their behavior, you can usually find a way to help. Imani's chest tightened. Even now, he was giving her an out, a way to explain her deception that wouldn't make her the villain. If she told him the truth about Rebecca, about the money, about her desperation, he would probably find a way to understand and forgive her. But Rebecca's threats echoed in her mind. Her future, her career, everything she'd worked for hung in the balance. You're very forgiving, she said. Life's too short to hold grudges, Jonathan replied. Besides, everyone deserves a second chance. Sometimes a third or fourth chance depending on the situation. After dinner, Jonathan walked her to the taxi he'd called, just like their first date. But this time, instead of saying goodnight immediately, he hesitated. Imani, I know we're still getting to know each other, but I feel like there's something real between us. Something worth exploring. Am I wrong about that? She looked up at him in the soft glow of the streetlight. His face was open, hopeful, vulnerable. This was the moment Rebecca had paid her for, the moment when she was supposed to crush his spirit and make him doubt himself. You're not wrong, she whispered. Jonathan's smile was brilliant. Then can I see you again? Soon? I know the charity work isn't everyone's idea of a perfect date, but there are other things I'd love to share with you. Museums, concerts, quiet walks in the park where we can just talk. Each suggestion was another nail in the coffin of her resolve. He wasn't offering expensive trips or flashy displays of wealth. He was offering time, attention, shared experiences. He was offering himself. I'd like that, she heard herself saying. Really? His excitement was infectious. How about Tuesday? I know a little gallery downtown that's showing work by local artists. Very low-key, but the pieces are incredible. Okay. And maybe afterward we could grab coffee and walk through the park? I know you're busy with school and work, but I promise I'll have you home at a reasonable hour. He was so considerate, so aware that her life was different from his, so careful not to assume she had unlimited free time. How had Rebecca ever convinced herself that this man was selfish or arrogant? That sounds perfect, Imani said. Jonathan leaned down and kissed her cheek gently, his lips barely brushing her skin. It was sweet and respectful and made her heart race. I'm really glad I met you, he said softly. Whatever brought you into my life, I'm grateful for it. The taxi pulled up then, saving her from having to respond. Jonathan opened the door for her and made sure she was settled before closing it. Text me when you get home safe, he said through the window. As the taxi pulled away, Imani touched her cheek where he'd kissed her and felt her world shifting. She was supposed to be ending this tonight, but instead she'd agreed to another date. Rebecca was going to be furious. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. Rebecca. How did it go? Please tell me you finally did what you were paid to do. Imani stared at the message for a long time before responding. It's complicated. Her phone rang instantly. Complicated how? Rebecca's voice was sharp. It's a simple task, Imani. Tell him you're not interested and walk away. He's not who you said he was, Imani said quietly. He's kind and generous and genuinely good. Maybe if you gave him another chance. Are you seriously trying to get me back together with my ex-boyfriend right now? Rebecca's laugh was harsh. Let me make something very clear. I don't want Jonathan back. I want him to suffer the way he made me suffer. I want him to question his judgment, to become cynical and suspicious, to never trust another woman the way he trusted me. That's sick. That's justice. And you're going to help me get it, or you're going to lose everything you care about. Your choice. The line went dead, leaving Imani alone with the consequences of her latest failure to complete the job she'd been hired for. She'd bought herself a few more days, but Rebecca's patience was clearly running out. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough and came too soon all at once. Imani spent hours getting ready, changing clothes until she found something that felt like her instead of like someone trying too hard to fit into Jonathan's world. The gallery was in a converted warehouse downtown, filled with paintings and sculptures created by artists who lived and worked in the city. Jonathan moved through the space like he belonged there, stopping to read every placard and pointing out details Imani might have missed. "This one reminds me of you," he said, stopping in front of a painting of a woman reading to children in a library. The woman in the painting had dark skin and gentle eyes, surrounded by kids of all ages hanging on her every word. It was beautiful and inspiring, and the fact that it reminded him of her made Imani's heart swell. "She looks like she loves what she's doing," Imani said. "Just like you looked on Saturday," Jonathan replied. "You have this light that comes on when you're working with the kids. Like you found exactly where you belong." If only he knew how desperately she wanted to belong somewhere, with someone. If only she could tell him that being with him felt like coming home after years of wandering. They spent 2 hours at the gallery talking about art and life and dreams for the future. Jonathan bought a small print from a young artist who was there showing her work, telling Imani he wanted to support emerging talent whenever he could. The coffee shop he chose afterward was a cozy place near the park, with mismatched furniture and local artwork on the walls. They claimed a table by the window and continued their conversation over lattes and shared pastry. "Tell me about your family," Jonathan said. "You've mentioned your mom a few times, but I'd love to know more." Imani found herself sharing stories she rarely told anyone. About her mother's strength and determination, about the struggles they'd faced, about the social worker who had changed both their lives by believing in Imani's potential. "She sounds incredible," Jonathan said when Imani finished telling him about her mother's current job managing a community program for single mothers. "I'd love to meet her someday if you'd be comfortable with that." The casual way he mentioned meeting her family made Imani realize how serious he was about building something real with her. He wasn't just looking for a few fun dates. He was looking for a relationship, a future, something lasting. "She'd like you," Imani said honestly. "She always told me to find someone who treats me like I'm worth fighting for." "You are worth fighting for," Jonathan said seriously. "You're worth everything good this world has to offer." They walked through the park as the sun set, holding hands and talking about everything from books to movies to their shared commitment to helping others. Jonathan told her more about his scholarship program, about the kids whose college dreams he'd helped make possible. "I want to do more," he said. "Expand the program, maybe start a mentorship component where successful graduates come back and work with new recipients. But it's hard to know where to start." "You could partner with social work programs at local colleges," Imani suggested. "Get students involved who are studying how to help people navigate systems and overcome barriers. It would be good experience for them and valuable support for the scholarship recipients." Jonathan stopped walking and turned to look at her. "That's brilliant. Have I mentioned lately that you're amazing?" The admiration in his voice, the way he looked at her like she'd just solved world hunger instead of making a simple suggestion, made her feel like she could do anything. With him beside her, she felt capable and valuable and seen. When he walked her to her door that night, there was a moment when she thought he might kiss her for real. They stood close together on her building's front steps, the porch light casting a warm glow over his face. "I had a wonderful time tonight," he said softly. "Thank you for sharing so much of yourself with me. I know trust doesn't come easily and I don't take it for granted." His words hit her like a knife to the heart. He thought she was trusting him with her real self, when actually everything about their relationship was built on lies. The guilt was becoming unbearable. "Jonathan," she started, but he placed a gentle finger against her lips. "Whatever you're worried about, whatever you think might be wrong with us, we can work through it together," he said. "I'm not going anywhere, Imani. I'm falling in love with you, and I want you to know that you're safe with me." The declaration hung between them, beautiful and terrible at the same time. He was falling in love with someone who didn't exist, someone who had been created to hurt him. And despite all her attempts at self-preservation, she was falling in love right back. "I should go inside," she whispered. "Of course." He stepped back, giving her space but not before pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Sweet dreams. I'll talk to you tomorrow." Imani climbed the stairs to her apartment, her heart breaking with every step. Jonathan Mitchell was everything she'd ever wanted in a partner and everything she couldn't have. The web of lies was getting more tangled every day, and soon it was going to collapse and destroy them both. But for tonight, she was going to hold on to the memory of his hand in hers and the way he'd said he was falling in love with her. Even if it couldn't last, even if it was all going to end in heartbreak, she'd had something real and beautiful for a brief, shining moment. That had to be enough. 3 days passed before Rebecca cornered Imani again, this time waiting by her car after her shift at the bookstore. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, but Rebecca's expression was darker than any shadow. "Get in," Rebecca said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I'm not going anywhere with you," Imani replied, clutching her keys. "Then we'll talk right here where anyone can hear us." Rebecca's smile was cold. I'm sure your coworkers would be fascinated to learn about your side job as a professional date saboteur. Imani looked around the parking lot. Several of her fellow students were within earshot, loading books into their cars and chatting about weekend plans. With no choice, she got into Rebecca's BMW. You missed another deadline, Rebecca said as soon as Imani closed the door. It's been 4 days since your gallery date, and from what I can tell, Jonathan is more smitten than ever. How do you know about our date? I have my sources, Rebecca replied vaguely. The point is, you're failing spectacularly at the one job I gave you. So tonight, you're going to fix this once and for all. Rebecca, you need to let this go. Whatever he did to you, ruining his chance at happiness isn't going to make you feel better. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. You have no idea what he did to me. What he made me believe about us, about our future together. Do you know he promised to marry me? Said he wanted to build a life together, have children, grow old side by side. And then, the moment I suggested we could expand the business, really make something of ourselves, he accused me of being materialistic and shallow. Maybe he just had different priorities. He humiliated me, Rebecca cut her off. Made me feel like wanting success and financial security was wrong, like I was some kind of gold digger for thinking we could be more than we were. Then he ended things and immediately started talking about finding someone who understood his values. Well, congratulations, he found her. You. The pain in Rebecca's voice was real, but it was twisted by months of resentment into something ugly and destructive. Imani could see how the breakup had hurt her, but she couldn't understand why that justified hurting Jonathan in return. Hurting him won't change what happened between you two, Imani said gently. But it will prove that I was right about his precious values, Rebecca replied. When he finds out that the woman he's falling for was paid to deceive him, when he realizes that even someone as seemingly sweet and genuine as you can be bought, it will destroy his faith in people. He'll never trust anyone again the way he trusted me. And that will be justice. Imani stared at Rebecca, seeing clearly for the first time just how damaged and dangerous she really was. This wasn't about money or status or even lost love. This was about a woman so hurt by rejection that she wanted to poison Jonathan's ability to ever love again. I won't do it, Imani said quietly. Yes, you will. Because tonight is your last chance. If you don't end this relationship by midnight, I'm going to make sure everyone who matters in your life knows exactly who you really are. Your professors, your classmates, your employer, your family. I'll tell them you're a liar and a fraud who preys on innocent people for money. They won't believe you. Won't they? Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed Imani a series of photos. Pictures of her getting into Rebecca's car, accepting money, meeting Jonathan at the restaurant. I have documentation of our entire business relationship. Bank records showing the payments, recordings of our phone conversations, photographs proving you took money to deceive someone. How do you think that's going to look to the social work program administrators? Imani's blood turned to ice. The photos were damning and taken out of context. They would destroy her reputation and her future career. No one would hire a social worker who had proven herself capable of deception and manipulation. You recorded our conversations without my consent? I recorded everything, Rebecca said with satisfaction. I don't leave anything to chance. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Jonathan right now and tell him you want to see him tonight. You're going to meet him somewhere public, tell him the truth about our arrangement, and make sure he understands that you never cared about him. Make it hurt, Imani. Make him regret ever believing in love at first sight. Imani's hands were shaking as she held her phone. She could call Jonathan, arrange to meet him, and destroy both their hearts. Or she could refuse, let Rebecca ruin her life, and hope that somehow Jonathan would understand when he learned the truth from someone else. What's it going to be? Rebecca asked. Your future or his feelings? With trembling fingers, Imani dialed Jonathan's number. Imani, he answered on the first ring, warmth flooding his voice. I was just thinking about you. How was your day? Can you meet me tonight? She asked, hating how her voice shook. There's something important I need to tell you. Of course. Is everything okay? You sound upset. I need to see you. Can you meet me at the park where we walked on Tuesday? By the fountain? I'll be there in 30 minutes, Jonathan said immediately. Imani, whatever this is about, we can work through it together, okay? She ended the call and handed the phone back to herself, looking at Rebecca with disgust. Good girl, Rebecca said. Don't disappoint me. And remember, I'll know if you try to soften the blow. Make sure he understands that you were never real, that it was all just a performance for money. Imani got out of the car without another word, her heart breaking with every step she took toward the park. The sun was setting, casting the sky in shades of orange and pink that should have been beautiful but felt like a funeral instead. Jonathan was already waiting by the fountain when she arrived, his face creased with concern. He stood up as she approached, reaching out to take her hands. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "You look like you've been crying." She had been, though she tried to clean up her face before leaving Rebecca's car. Looking at Jonathan now, seeing the genuine care and worry in his eyes, made her want to cry all over again. "Can we sit down?" she asked. They sat on a bench facing the fountain, and Jonathan turned his body toward hers, giving her his full attention. "Whatever it is, you can tell me," he said gently. "I told you I'm not going anywhere." "You will after tonight," Imani whispered. Jonathan's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Imani took a shaky breath and forced herself to look into his eyes. If she was going to destroy the best thing that had ever happened to her, at least she would do it honestly. "My name isn't Jennifer," she began. "It's Imani Washington. I've been lying to you since the moment we met." Jonathan was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "Okay," he said finally. "Why?" "Because I was paid to." The words came out in a rush. "Your ex-girlfriend Rebecca hired me to ruin our first date. She gave me $50 to make you never want to see me again, to make you regret ever agreeing to go on a blind date." The color drained from Jonathan's face. "What?" "She said you'd hurt her and she wanted revenge. She wanted me to be late, to be rude, to make the evening so terrible that you'd never want to date anyone she set you up with again." Jonathan stood up abruptly, pacing away from the bench before turning back to her. "So everything between us, our conversations, the charity work, the way you looked at me, all of that was fake?" "No," Imani said desperately. "That's the problem. None of that was fake. I was supposed to make you hate me, but instead—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Instead what?" "Instead I fell in love with you," she whispered. Jonathan stared at her, his expression cycling through hurt, confusion, and anger. "How am I supposed to believe that? How do I know this isn't just another part of the performance?" "Because I'm risking everything to tell you the truth," Imani said, tears streaming down her face. "Rebecca threatened to destroy my reputation, my career, everything I've worked for if I didn't follow through with her plan. She has photos, recordings, proof that I took money to deceive you. But I can't keep lying to you, Jonathan. I can't keep pretending that this relationship isn't the most real thing that's ever happened to me." "You took money to hurt me," Jonathan said, his voice hollow. "You sat across from me at dinner, you worked with children beside me, you let me fall in love with you, all while knowing you were being paid to destroy me." "I tried to stop," Imani said desperately. "After our first date, I wanted to give the money back, but Rebecca wouldn't let me. She kept threatening me, demanding that I make the next date worse. But I couldn't do it, Jonathan. Every time I was with you, you were so kind, so genuine, so different from what she told me to expect. So you just kept lying instead," Jonathan said bitterly. "You kept letting me believe in something that wasn't real." "My feelings for you were real," Imani insisted. "Everything I told you about myself, about my dreams, about wanting to help kids. All of that was true. The only lie was how we met." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, staring at the fountain. When he finally looked at her again, his expression was carefully controlled. "I need to understand something," he said quietly. "If Rebecca hadn't threatened you tonight, would you ever have told me the truth?" Imani opened her mouth to say yes, but the honest answer stuck in her throat. She'd been planning to tell him so many times, but she'd always found an excuse to wait, to delay, to protect herself a little longer. "I don't know," she whispered. Jonathan nodded slowly as if her answer confirmed something he'd already suspected. "I see. Jonathan, please. I know I handled this all wrong, but my feelings for you are real. Everything between us, it wasn't part of the plan. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen," Jonathan said, standing up from the bench. "And now I have to figure out what part of the woman I fell in love with actually exists and what part was just a very good actress doing a job." "I'm not an actress," Imani said desperately. "I'm just someone who made a terrible mistake because I was desperate and scared. But the woman you fell in love with, that's who I really am. That's who I am when I'm with you." Jonathan looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him struggling with everything she'd told him. Finally he shook his head. "I can't do this right now," he said quietly. "I need time to think, to process all of this. I need space." He walked away without another word, leaving Imani sitting alone by the fountain as darkness fell around her. She told him the truth, but instead of bringing them together, it had destroyed everything they'd built. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Well done. I could see the whole conversation from my car. He looked sufficiently devastated. Imani deleted the message without responding and walked home through the empty streets, wondering if doing the right thing was supposed to hurt this much. Jonathan didn't sleep that night. He sat in his apartment, staring out at the city lights and trying to process everything Imani had told him. Every conversation they'd had, every moment they'd shared, every feeling he'd developed, now had to be examined through the lens of her confession. Had she really meant it when she'd said she was falling in love with him? Or had that been another manipulation, designed to make him forgive her deception? The worst part was that he could understand her initial motivation. $50 might not seem like much to him, but he remembered being a broke college student. He remembered the desperate calculations of choosing between textbooks and groceries, the fear of falling behind on rent, the way even small amounts of money could feel like salvation. But understanding her desperation didn't erase the betrayal. She'd sat across from him at dinner, laughed at his jokes, let him share his hopes and dreams, all while knowing she was there to hurt him. She'd worked beside him with the children, accepted his gifts, met his friends, and never once found the courage to tell him the truth. His phone had been ringing all morning with calls from Rebecca. He'd been ignoring them, but finally, around noon, he answered. I heard you had an interesting conversation last night, Rebecca said without preamble. Stay away from me, Jonathan said flatly. We're done, Rebecca. Whatever this was about, it's over. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, this is just getting started. Did you know that Imani called you at least 12 times after you left her at the park? She's desperate, Jonathan. Desperate enough to do anything for money, including breaking your heart. You paid her to hurt me, Jonathan said, anger finally breaking through his numbness. You orchestrated this entire thing because you couldn't handle being rejected. I orchestrated this because you needed to learn the truth about people, Rebecca replied. Everyone has a price, Jonathan. Everyone can be bought, even your precious saint of a social worker. At least now you know what kind of person you were really falling for. The only thing I know is what kind of person you are, Jonathan said. And it's not someone I want in my life. He hung up and blocked her number, but her words kept echoing in his head. Was she right? Was Imani the kind of person who could be bought? Or was she just someone who'd made a desperate mistake and then gotten in too deep to know how to fix it? Jonathan found himself driving to the community center without really deciding to go there. Saturday morning volunteering had become such a routine that his body seemed to know the way automatically. Robert Johnson, the program coordinator, was setting up chairs when Jonathan walked in. You're early today, Robert observed. And you look like you haven't slept. Everything okay? Jonathan considered lying, giving some generic excuse about work stress or insomnia. But Robert had become a friend over the months they'd worked together, and he found himself wanting to talk to someone who wasn't involved in the situation. Have you ever had someone surprise you? Jonathan asked. Someone you thought you knew turn out to be completely different from what you expected? Robert paused in his chair arrangement and studied Jonathan's face. This about that young lady you brought last week? Imani? How could you tell? Because she's the first person you've ever brought here, and because you both looked at each other like you'd found something special. Robert sat down in one of the chairs and gestured for Jonathan to do the same. What happened? Jonathan found himself telling Robert everything. About Rebecca, about the fake setup, about Imani's confession and the $50 that had started it all. Robert listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. So now you don't know what to believe, Robert said when Jonathan finished. Exactly. How do I know what was real and what was performance? Robert was quiet for a moment, thinking. Let me ask you something. When she was here with the kids, what did you see? What do you mean? I mean when she was working with Isabella, when she was talking to the other volunteers, when she thought nobody was watching her. What did you see? Jonathan closed his eyes and remembered. Imani kneeling down to Isabella's level, patiently helping her sound out difficult words. The genuine joy on her face when the little girl finished a challenging page. The way she talked to the other volunteers like equals, not like people she was trying to impress. I saw someone who cared, Jonathan said quietly. Someone who belonged here. And when you two were planning that literacy expansion program? When she made those suggestions about partnering with social work students? She was brilliant, Jonathan admitted. Her ideas were thoughtful, practical, designed to actually help people instead of just looking good on paper. Sounds to me like you saw the real person, Robert said. People can fake a lot of things, but they can't fake genuine care for children. They can't fake the kind of insight that comes from really understanding how to help people. And they especially can't fake it consistently, over multiple interactions, when they're not even thinking about performing. Jonathan felt something loosen in his chest. But she still lied to me. For weeks. Yes, she did, Robert agreed. And that was wrong. But the question isn't whether she made mistakes. The question is whether you believe she's genuinely sorry for those mistakes and whether you think she's learned from them. How am I supposed to know that? Well, Robert said with a slight smile, I imagine if she shows up here this morning despite everything that happened last night, that might tell you something. Jonathan looked at his watch. It was almost 10 o'clock, time for the kids to start arriving. He found himself watching the door, wondering if Imani would come, hoping she would and dreading it at the same time. At 5 minutes past 10 she walked in. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept any more than he had. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, and she moved like someone who was forcing herself to put one foot in front of the other. But she was there. Their eyes met across the room and Jonathan saw her hesitate, clearly debating whether to approach him or leave. Before he could decide how he felt about seeing her, Isabella came running through the door. Miss Imani, the little girl called out, racing toward her. You came. I brought the book we started last week. Imani's face transformed as she knelt down to hug Isabella, and Jonathan saw again what Robert had been talking about. The love and care in her expression wasn't fake. It couldn't be. I wouldn't miss it, Imani told Isabella softly. Are you ready to find out what happens to the brave little mouse? For the next hour, Jonathan watched Imani work with Isabella and interact with the other children and volunteers. She was quieter than usual, more subdued, but her genuine care for the kids was as evident as ever. She helped a struggling reader work through a difficult paragraph, celebrated with another child who finished his first chapter book, and made time to listen to a shy little boy who wanted to tell her about his pet hamster. When the program ended and the children began leaving with their families, Isabella hugged Imani extra tight. Are you sad about something, Miss Imani? The perceptive little girl asked. You seem different today. I'm okay, sweetheart, Imani said, smoothing Isabella's hair. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings about things, but that doesn't change how much I love reading with you. Will you be here next week? Imani glanced across the room at Jonathan, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. I don't know yet, Isabella. But if I can't be here, I'll make sure you have someone wonderful to read with, okay? After the children left, most of the volunteers began cleaning up and saying their goodbyes. Jonathan found himself alone with Imani in the activity room, surrounded by scattered books and small chairs. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. Isabella would have been heartbroken if you hadn't shown up. I couldn't let her down, Imani replied, not meeting his eyes. She's been looking forward to finishing that story all week. Is that the only reason you came? Imani finally looked at him and he could see the pain she was trying so hard to hide. No. I came because I hoped maybe we could talk. Really talk without Rebecca's threats hanging over us, without me trying to protect myself. Just honestly about what happened and where we go from here. Jonathan felt his heart skip. And where do you think we go from here? I don't know, Imani said, her voice barely a whisper. I know I hurt you. I know I violated your trust in the worst possible way. I know you have every right to never want to see me again. But Jonathan, what I felt for you, what I still feel for you, it's real. It's the most real thing I've ever experienced. How do I know that's not just another performance? Jonathan asked, but his voice lacked the anger it had held the night before. Because I'm here, Imani said simply. I'm here even though Rebecca got what she wanted. I'm here even though you might reject me. I'm here even though I have nothing left to gain and everything to lose. I'm here because I love you and I love what we built together, and I can't stand the thought of it ending because of my mistakes. Jonathan studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. What he saw instead was raw vulnerability, genuine remorse, and a love so deep it made his chest ache. I need you to understand something, he said finally. What hurt the most wasn't that you took Rebecca's money. It wasn't even that you lied to me initially. What hurt was that you kept lying day after day even as we got closer. Even as I shared more of myself with you. I know, Imani said, tears starting to fall. I know, and I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I was scared. Scared of losing you, scared of Rebecca's threats, scared of facing the consequences of what I'd done. But being scared doesn't excuse it. I should have trusted you with the truth. Yes, you should have, Jonathan agreed. But I also should have created a safe space for you to tell me. I should have noticed that you were struggling with something, should have asked better questions, should have made it clear that I cared more about honesty than perfection. Imani looked up at him with surprise. You're not entirely responsible for my mistakes, Jonathan. No, but relationships are partnerships. If we're going to make this work, if we're going to try to build something real together, it has to be built on complete honesty. No more secrets, no more protecting each other from difficult truths. Can you do that? Hope flickered in Imani's eyes. Are you willing to try again? Jonathan took a deep breath, thinking about everything Robert had said, everything he'd observed that morning, everything his heart was telling him despite his wounded pride. I'm saying I'd like to try, he said carefully. But it's going to take time to rebuild trust. And it's going to require complete transparency going forward. About everything. Imani nodded eagerly. Anything. I'll tell you anything you want to know. Then let's start with this, Jonathan said, stepping closer to her. Are you okay? Really okay? Because you look like you haven't eaten or slept since yesterday. Despite everything, Imani smiled at his concern for her well-being. I haven't really. I've been too worried about whether you'd ever forgive me to think about taking care of myself. Well, that stops now, Jonathan said firmly. Come on. I'm buying you lunch and we're going to figure out how to move forward from here. Together. As they left the community center together, Jonathan felt something he hadn't felt since Imani's confession the night before. Hope. They had a long road ahead of them, rebuilding trust and learning to be completely honest with each other. But for the first time he believed they might actually make it. The woman walking beside him wasn't perfect, but she was real. And that was enough to start with. 2 weeks after their conversation at the community center, Jonathan and Imani had settled into a careful routine of rebuilding their relationship. They talked every day, sometimes for hours, working through the complicated emotions left by her deception and his hurt. They met for coffee, took long walks, and slowly began to trust each other again. Imani had been completely transparent about everything in her life. She'd shown Jonathan her bank statements, her school records, her work schedule, anything he wanted to see to prove she had no more secrets. She'd even given him Rebecca's contact information and encouraged him to ask her any questions he needed answers to. Jonathan, for his part, had been working on understanding why Imani's situation had driven her to such desperate measures. He'd spent time researching student debt, the cost of textbooks, and the struggles facing working-class college students. The more he learned, the more he understood how overwhelming her financial pressures must have been. But understanding didn't erase all the lingering hurt and doubt. Some days were better than others. Some conversations flowed easily like they had before, while others were stilted and careful, both of them walking on eggshells around the damaged trust between them. It was during one of their more difficult conversations that Jonathan realized something had to change. I can see you holding back, Imani said quietly as they sat on a bench in the park. Every time you start to open up, you pull back. I don't blame you, but I need to know if you think we can ever get past this. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. I want to get past it. But I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to reveal some other secret or for this to all be part of some elaborate plan I don't understand yet. How can I prove to you that there are no other shoes? Imani asked. What would it take for you to trust me again? I don't know, Jonathan admitted. And that's the problem. I don't know what I need from you because I've never been in this situation before. I've never had to rebuild trust with someone I love. The word love hung between them, the first time either of them had used it since her confession. Imani's eyes filled with tears. Do you still love me? She asked softly. Even after everything? Yes, Jonathan said without hesitation. I hate that I love you sometimes because it would be so much easier if I could just walk away. But I do love you, Imani. I love who you are when you're not scared, when you're not protecting yourself. I love the woman I see when you're working with the kids, when you're sharing your ideas about helping people, when you let your guard down and just be yourself. Then what do we do? How do we move forward? Jonathan looked at her for a long moment, this woman who had turned his world upside down and then put it back together in a completely different configuration. An idea began to form in his mind, something that would address both their needs and maybe, just maybe, give them the fresh start they both desperately wanted. Can you meet me at my office tomorrow afternoon? He asked. Around 3 o'clock? Your office? Jonathan, what are you thinking? Just trust me, he said, then caught himself. I'm sorry. I know that's a lot to ask right now. No, Imani said firmly. I do trust you. You've never given me a reason not to. I'll be there. The next afternoon, Imani stood outside Mitchell Tech Solutions, nervous about why Jonathan had asked her to come to his workplace. She'd never seen his office, had only heard him talk about his company in general terms. The building was impressive but not ostentatious, modern glass and steel that suggested success without being flashy. The receptionist directed her to the elevator, and soon she was standing outside a corner office with Jonathan's name on the door. She knocked softly. "Come in," Jonathan called. His office was warm and inviting, with family photos and artwork from local artists on the walls. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a view of the city, and there was a comfortable seating area with couches and a coffee table. It felt more like a living room than a corporate office. Jonathan stood up from behind his desk as she entered, but he wasn't alone. A woman with graying hair and kind eyes rose from one of the couches. "Imani, I'd like you to meet my mother, Patricia Mitchell." "Mom, this is Imani Washington." Imani's heart started racing. Why was she meeting his mother? What had he told her about their complicated situation? "It's lovely to meet you, dear," Patricia said warmly, extending her hand. "Jonathan has told me so much about you and your work with the reading program." "It's nice to meet you too, Mrs. Mitchell," Imani replied, shooting a questioning look at Jonathan. "Please call me Patricia. And please sit down. Jonathan has something he'd like to discuss with both of us." Jonathan gestured for them to sit on the couches, and he took the chair across from them. He looked nervous, which made Imani even more anxious about what was happening. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation yesterday," Jonathan began, looking directly at Imani. "About trust, about moving forward, about what we both need to feel secure in this relationship. And I realize that part of the problem is that our lives are still very separate. You're worried about money, about school, about building a career. I'm worried about whether you're being completely honest with me. But what if we could address both of those concerns at the same time?" "What do you mean?" Imani asked. "I mean, I want to offer you a job," Jonathan said. "A real job with a real salary, working here at Mitchell Tech Solutions." Imani stared at him. "Jonathan, I don't know anything about software development." "You don't need to," Patricia interjected with a smile. "Tell her about the position, honey." Jonathan leaned forward, his excitement becoming evident. "We've been talking about expanding our community outreach programs, creating partnerships with local organizations that serve underprivileged populations. What we need is someone who understands social services, who can build relationships with nonprofits, who can help us make sure our charitable giving is actually making a difference instead of just looking good in press releases." "You want to hire me to run your charity programs?" Imani asked, hardly believing what she was hearing. "I want to hire you to create our charity programs," Jonathan corrected. "To build something from the ground up that reflects both your values and mine. To make sure we're helping people in ways that actually matter, not just writing checks and calling it philanthropy." Imani felt overwhelmed. "I haven't even finished my degree yet." "Which is why part of the job offer includes tuition assistance," Patricia said gently. "We want you to finish your education, but we also want you to start gaining practical experience in the field you're passionate about. The salary would be enough to cover your living expenses and then some," Jonathan added. "You wouldn't have to work at the bookstore anymore, wouldn't have to worry about rent or textbooks or any of the financial pressures that got you into this situation in the first place." Imani's mind was reeling. It sounded too good to be true, like something out of a fairy tale. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because I love you," Jonathan said simply. "And because I believe in you. I've seen what you can do when you're not scared, when you're not desperate, when you're free to be your best self. I want to give you that freedom. And because I've seen how my son lights up when he talks about you," Patricia added. "I've never seen him as happy as he's been these past few weeks, even with all the complications. If you're the woman who makes him smile like that, then I want to help give you both the best possible chance at building something lasting." Tears were streaming down Imani's face. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Jonathan said softly. "Say yes to the job, say yes to finishing your education without financial stress, say yes to building something meaningful together. Say yes to us." Imani looked at Jonathan, then at his mother, then back at Jonathan. These people barely knew her, had every reason to be suspicious of her motives, but they were offering her everything she'd ever dreamed of. Not just financial security, but the chance to do work that mattered, to make a difference in the world. "What if I mess this up?" she asked. "What if I'm not good enough, smart enough, experienced enough?" "Then we'll figure it out together," Jonathan said. "That's what partnerships are about. Supporting each other, learning together, growing together. The salary we're offering is competitive for someone with your education and experience," Patricia added practically. "This isn't charity, Imani. This is a legitimate business opportunity that we believe will benefit everyone involved." Imani thought about Isabella, about all the kids at the reading program, about the social worker who had changed her life by believing in her potential. She thought about the conversation she'd had with Jonathan about expanding the literacy program, about all the ideas she'd had for helping people that she'd never had the resources to implement. "Yes," she said quietly, then louder, "yes. I accept." Jonathan's smile was brilliant as he stood up and crossed to her couch, pulling her into a hug that felt like coming home. "There's one more thing," he said as they separated. "This job offer isn't contingent on our personal relationship. If things don't work out between us romantically, you still have the position for as long as you want it and as long as you're doing good work. I don't want you to ever feel trapped or like your livelihood depends on keeping me happy." The thoughtfulness of that provision, the way he'd considered her need for independence and security, made Imani love him even more. "Thank you," she whispered. "For believing in me, for giving me this chance, for not giving up on us." "Thank you for being brave enough to tell me the truth," Jonathan replied. "And for being here, fighting for us instead of just walking away when things got hard." Patricia stood up, dabbing at her own eyes. "Well, I think this calls for a celebration dinner. Imani, I hope you'll join us. I'd love to hear more about your ideas for the community outreach programs." As they left the office together, Imani felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope for the future. Not just hope for survival, not just hope for getting by, but hope for thriving, for building something meaningful, for loving and being loved in return. She'd made terrible mistakes, had hurt someone she cared about, had almost lost everything that mattered. But sometimes, if you were very lucky and very sorry and very committed to doing better, you got a second chance. And Imani was determined to make the most of hers. 6 months later, Imani sat in her office at Mitchell Tech Solutions, reviewing the applications for their new scholarship program. The morning sun streamed through her windows, illuminating the photos on her desk. Pictures of kids from the reading program, a group shot from the community center's fundraising gala, and her favorite photo of her and Jonathan at last month's charity walk. The Community Impact Division, as they'd officially named her department, had exceeded everyone's expectations. In 6 months, they'd established partnerships with 12 local nonprofits, created a mentorship program for scholarship recipients, and launched a digital literacy initiative for seniors. The work was challenging, fulfilling, and exactly what Imani had always dreamed of doing. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. "Lunch at our usual spot? I have something I want to show you." Imani smiled, gathering her purse and leaving a note for her assistant. Their usual spot was the little sandwich shop near the community center, where they'd started meeting regularly after Saturday volunteer sessions. She found Jonathan already there, sitting at their favorite table by the window. He stood up as she approached, greeting her with a kiss that still made her heart skip even after all these months together. "How's your morning going?" he asked as they settled into their seats. "Good. Busy. We received over 300 applications for the scholarship program, which is both exciting and overwhelming." Imani paused to order her usual sandwich from the waitress. "What about you? You seemed mysterious in your text." Jonathan's eyes were bright with excitement. "I had an interesting conversation with the mayor's office this morning. They want to discuss expanding our literacy program citywide, possibly making it a model for other cities to follow." "Are you serious?" Imani's excitement matched his own. "That would be incredible. We could help so many more children." "That's what I thought. But it would also mean a lot more responsibility for you. Coordinating with multiple city departments, managing a much larger budget, possibly traveling to other cities to help them implement similar programs." Imani felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with excitement. 6 months ago, she would have been too scared to even consider such a large undertaking. But the woman she'd become, with Jonathan's support and her own growing confidence, felt ready for the challenge. "I'd love to try," she said. "When do they want to meet?" "Next week. But there's something else." Jonathan reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This came to the office today, addressed to both of us." Imani's heart sank as she recognized the handwriting. Rebecca. They hadn't heard from her in months, not since Jonathan had made it clear that any further contact would result in legal action. "Should I open it?" Imani asked, dreading what might be inside. "We'll open it together," Jonathan said, reaching across the table to take her hand. With trembling fingers, Imani opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Rebecca's distinctive handwriting. "Jonathan and Imani, I've been watching your relationship develop over the past few months, and I have to admit I was wrong. About both of you, but especially about you, Jonathan. I hired Imani to prove that everyone has a price, that no one can be trusted, that your faith in people was naive and dangerous. Instead, I watched you forgive someone who had genuinely wronged you, work to understand her motivations, and create opportunities for her to thrive rather than punish her for her mistakes. I also watched Imani choose honesty over self-protection, choose love over fear, and work every day to prove herself worthy of the second chance you gave her. Your relationship has shown me something I didn't want to see, that some people really are good, that some love really is unconditional, and that sometimes the best response to being hurt is to choose healing instead of revenge. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable. But I wanted you to know that your example has inspired me to get help, to work on the anger and bitterness that nearly destroyed not just your happiness, but my own ability to ever trust or love again. I wish you both every happiness. You've earned it. Rebecca. Imani finished reading the letter with tears in her eyes. She looked up to find Jonathan staring at her with wonder. She's right, you know, he said softly. About you choosing love over fear. That took more courage than I think I understood at the time. We both chose love, Imani replied. You could have walked away after I told you the truth. Most people would have. But you chose to see past my mistakes to who I really was underneath. Jonathan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her fingers gently. I'm glad we both made that choice. Their lunch arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. The upcoming community center fundraiser, Isabella's progress as a reader, Jonathan's mother's latest quilting project. But underneath the casual conversation was a deeper current of contentment, of two people who had found their way to each other through mistakes and forgiveness and were building something beautiful together. After lunch, they walked hand in hand toward the community center, where Jonathan needed to drop off some supplies for Saturday's program. The afternoon was warm and bright, and the neighborhood around them buzzed with activity. Imani, Jonathan said as they reached the community center's front steps, there's actually one more thing I wanted to talk to you about today. Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. He seemed nervous, excited, and determined all at once. What is it? Instead of answering, Jonathan stopped walking and turned to face her fully. To her amazement, he dropped to one knee right there on the front steps of the community center where they'd volunteered together, where they'd rebuilt their trust, where they'd fallen in love with the people they became when they were together. Imani Washington, he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket, I know our story didn't start in the most conventional way. We've been through more challenges in the past year than some couples face in a lifetime. But every single day I've watched you choose courage over fear, honesty over self-protection, love over safety. You've made me a better man, a better partner, a better human being. Tears were streaming down Imani's face as she realized what was happening. A small crowd had gathered around them, including several of the community center regulars who knew them both. I love your passion for helping people, Jonathan continued. I love your laugh, your determination, your ability to see the potential in everyone around you. I love how you've never let your past define your future, and I love how you've taught me that sometimes the best things in life are worth fighting for. He opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful solitaire ring. Will you marry me? He asked. Will you be my partner in all of this, in the work we do, in the life we're building, in the love we fought so hard to protect? The crowd around them was completely silent, waiting for her answer. Imani looked down at Jonathan, this man who had seen her at her worst and loved her anyway, who had given her not just forgiveness but a future, who had proven every day that love really could conquer fear if you were brave enough to choose it. Yes, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, absolutely yes. The crowd erupted in cheers as Jonathan slipped the ring onto her finger and stood up to kiss her. Through the noise and celebration, Imani heard a familiar voice calling out, Miss Imani. Mr. Jonathan. Isabella came running up the steps with her grandmother close behind, having arrived for the after-school program just in time to witness the proposal. Are you getting married? The little girl asked, bouncing with excitement. We are, Imani said, kneeling down to Isabella's level. What do you think about that? I think it's the best thing ever, Isabella declared. You two belong together. Everyone can see it. As the crowd gradually dispersed and they made their way inside the community center, Imani felt overwhelmed by the completeness of the moment. She was surrounded by the work she loved, the community she'd found, the man who had seen past her mistakes to love the person she was becoming. Her phone buzzed with congratulations texts as word of their engagement spread. Her mother crying with joy. Tiffany threatening to take over wedding planning. Even Robert from the community center, welcoming her officially to the family she'd already been part of for months. That evening, as they sat on Jonathan's apartment balcony watching the sun set over the city, Imani reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. "A year ago, I was desperate enough to take $50 to hurt a stranger," she said quietly. "I never could have imagined this. A year ago, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted my life to look like," Jonathan replied. "I had it all planned out, safe and predictable and completely under my control. I never could have imagined how much better it would be to build a life with someone else, someone who challenges me and surprises me and makes me want to be braver than I am." "Are you nervous?" Imani asked. "About getting married, about all the changes coming with the city program?" "Terrified," Jonathan admitted with a laugh. "But it's the good kind of terrified, the kind that means you're about to do something that really matters." "Are you?" "Terrified," Imani agreed. "But ready." So ready. As if summoned by their conversation about the future, both their phones buzzed with messages about Monday morning meetings, program proposals, and the 100 small details of building their shared vision for helping others. But for now, they put the phones aside and focused on the sunset, on each other, on the quiet moment of peace before launching into the beautiful chaos of their life together. Sometimes the best love stories don't start with love at first sight or fairy tale meetings. Sometimes they start with mistakes and desperation and the courage to tell the truth even when it hurts. Sometimes they begin with someone paying you $50 to ruin a date, and end with the realization that the best things in life can't be bought, can't be faked, and can't be destroyed by anyone who doesn't have the courage to fight for them. Imani had learned that love wasn't about perfection or safety or never making mistakes. It was about finding someone who would see your worst self and choose to believe in your best self. It was about building something together that was stronger than either person could create alone. And as she sat there with Jonathan's ring on her finger and his hand in hers, watching the sun set over the city where they'd found each other and lost each other and found each other again, Imani knew that their story was just beginning. The best part wasn't behind them. It was yet to come. Are you someone who believes in second chances and the power of love to overcome deception? This story shows us that sometimes our biggest mistakes can lead to our greatest blessings if we're brave enough to face the truth. What did you think of Imani and Jonathan's journey? Let me know in the comments below and subscribe for more inspiring love stories that prove redemption is always possible when we choose courage over fear.